It was past midnight, and the highway stretched endlessly under the pouring rain. The world felt empty, quiet, and lonely. The sound of thunder rolled across the sky as Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his wipers moving fast, but barely keeping up with the heavy rain. He had just finished a long shift at work, and all he wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and rest. His eyes were tired, and the road ahead looked blurry under the wet glow of the streetlights. But then something caught his attention. Far ahead, a pair of blinking hazard lights flickered through the rain. At first he thought it might be a police car or a road accident, but as he got closer, he saw an old silver sedan parked on the side of the road. Beside it stood a woman holding a small black umbrella. Her clothes were soaked, her hair stuck to her face, and she looked cold and frightened. Ethan slowed down, unsure at first. It was a strange time and place for someone to be stranded. Still, his kind nature wouldn't let him drive past. He rolled down his window and leaned toward the passenger side. "Are you okay?" he called out through the rain. The woman hesitated. Her eyes darted around nervously before she finally looked at him. "My car, it just died," she said softly. "I don't know what to do." Her voice trembled, not just from the cold, but from something else, something that sounded like fear. Ethan studied her for a moment. She seemed to be in her late 20s, maybe early 30s. There was nothing unusual about her, yet there was something about the way she kept glancing over her shoulder, as if expecting something, or someone, to appear from the shadows. Ethan parked his car behind hers and turned on his hazard lights. "Don't worry," he said kindly. "Let's take a look." He grabbed his jacket, stepped into the rain, and walked toward her car. The storm hit his face like tiny needles, and the sound of rain on metal filled the air. The woman stepped aside as he opened the hood, the dim yellow light from his phone barely bright enough to see. Steam rose from the engine, and the smell of wet metal and oil filled the air. "What happened?" Ethan asked, raising his voice over the rain. She shook her head. "I don't know. It just stopped." The engine made a strange sound, and then everything went dark. Ethan nodded and began checking the battery connections and wires. He wasn't a mechanic, but he knew a little about cars. As he worked, he noticed the woman kept looking toward the dark forest on the other side of the road. Her eyes widened every few seconds, and her hand tightened around the umbrella handle. Ethan finally asked, "Are you sure you're okay?" "You keep looking back there." The woman flinched slightly, then forced a smile. "It's nothing," she said. "I just feel like someone's watching us." The words sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He turned and looked into the darkness behind them. The forest was thick, wet, and silent, except for the sound of raindrops hitting the leaves. He couldn't see anything unusual, but the feeling of being watched suddenly crawled up his back. He laughed nervously and said, "It's probably just the rain." Nights like this can make anyone paranoid. But deep inside, he didn't fully believe that. He could feel something strange in the air, the kind of silence that comes before something happens. He continued checking under the hood, and after a few minutes, he noticed a loose wire connected to the battery. "I think I found the problem," he said. "This wire came loose. Give me a second." He tightened it, and the car's engine came to life with a loud roar. The woman gasped with relief. "Oh my God, thank you. I thought I'd be stuck here all night." Ethan smiled. "No problem. Just make sure to get it checked tomorrow. It might happen again." She nodded quickly. "I will. Thank you so much, really." For a brief moment, Ethan felt good. Helping people was something he believed in, even if it was inconvenient. The woman introduced herself as Clara. Her smile was warm but uneasy, as if she was still worried about something unseen. "You live around here?" Ethan asked, trying to make small talk. She shook her head. "No, I was just passing through, visiting a friend." Her answer sounded simple, but her eyes told another story, one filled with secrets and fear. "Well, your car seems fine now," Ethan said. "I'll follow you for a bit just to make sure everything's okay." Clara looked surprised, then grateful. "That's kind of you." "Thank you." Ethan got back into his car and started driving behind her. The rain began to ease, and the road ahead glistened under the wet glow of the streetlights. For a few minutes, everything seemed fine. Her car moved steadily ahead, and Ethan felt reassured that she was safe now. But suddenly her car slowed down and turned sharply onto a narrow dirt road that led into the forest. Ethan frowned. That path didn't look like a normal road, more like an abandoned trail. He slowed his car but didn't follow her. The silver sedan disappeared into the trees, its red taillights fading like ghosts in the rain. Ethan sat there for a moment, confused. Why would she go that way? Maybe it was a shortcut to her friend's place, he thought. But the uneasy feeling in his chest wouldn't go away. He finally turned his car around and drove home, trying to shake off the strange encounter. The image of Clara's frightened face stayed in his mind. As he parked outside his small house, the rain stopped completely, leaving the night strangely quiet. Ethan changed into dry clothes, made himself a cup of tea, and sat by the window. The wind had died down, and the world outside seemed calm again. But when he looked out toward the empty street, something made his heart skip a beat. Far down the road, just for a second, he thought he saw a pair of headlights, and not moving, just standing still. He blinked and they were gone. Maybe it was his imagination. Maybe it was nothing. But deep inside, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that tonight's story wasn't over yet. He didn't know it then, but that short act of kindness would change his life forever. The night had more in store for him, something that would begin with another sound a few hours later. A knock at his door. After that strange night on the highway, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the woman he helped. The rain had stopped by the time he reached home, but the sound of it still echoed in his ears. He tried to convince himself that it was just a random act of kindness, nothing more, yet his mind refused to rest. Something about Clara felt different, like there was a story behind her frightened eyes that she didn't tell him. He replayed the moment in his head again and again, the way she looked over her shoulder, the trembling in her voice, and that uneasy silence in the woods. Maybe she was just scared, he thought. Or maybe she wasn't alone that night. Ethan didn't know which thought bothered him more. He stayed awake for hours, sipping cold tea and staring out the window, hoping those headlights he saw earlier wouldn't come back. By morning, the sky was grey and heavy. He got ready for work, trying to push the whole thing out of his mind. But as he reached for his car keys, he noticed something odd. There were muddy footprints near his front porch. 2 sets, one small, one large. They led up to his front door and then back toward the road. Ethan froze. He hadn't noticed them before. Maybe they were from the night before, he thought. Maybe he just didn't pay attention. But deep down he knew he hadn't stepped there. His shoes were still dry inside. Someone had been near his house after he came home. He tried to ignore the uneasy feeling building inside him. After all, it was probably nothing. Maybe some kids or a delivery guy. But even as he locked the door and drove to work, that heavy feeling stayed with him, pressing on his chest like a weight he couldn't shake. The day dragged on slowly. Ethan worked at a local hardware store, and though customers came and went, his mind was somewhere else. He couldn't stop thinking about Clara's car turning down that narrow dirt road. Why had she gone that way? He wanted to believe she was safe, that she had reached her destination, but the more he thought about it, the stranger it seemed. When he finished his shift, he decided to take a detour home, passing by the same stretch of road where he had met her. The rain had left the ground damp, and the trees looked darker than usual. As he drove past the spot, something caught his eye, a broken piece of metal lying near the ditch. He stopped the car and stepped out to look. It was part of a license plate, bent and scratched. The letters RA were still visible. He felt a chill run down his spine. Clara's car had a license plate that started with Ray. He remembered it clearly because he saw it while helping her. He looked around, scanning the forest edge, but everything was still and silent. The only sound was the rustling of wet leaves. He took the metal piece with him and drove off, feeling more unsettled than ever. When he got home that evening, he placed it on his kitchen table and stared at it. Maybe it's a coincidence, he whispered to himself, but even his voice didn't sound convinced. As night fell, he tried distracting himself by watching TV, but every sound outside made him jump. At one point he thought he heard something like a soft knock, but when he went to check, there was no one there. He laughed nervously and muttered, "I'm losing my mind." To calm himself, he stepped outside onto the porch. The air was cool and the wind carried the smell of wet earth. Across the street, he noticed something that made his stomach twist. Parked under a streetlight was a black SUV. Its windows were tinted so dark that he couldn't see inside. Ethan stared at it for a long moment, waiting to see if anyone was in it, but it didn't move. He turned to go back inside, but when he looked again, the SUV's headlights flashed once, almost like a signal. Then it drove away slowly into the fog. Ethan stood frozen. He hadn't told anyone about Clara. No one even knew he had helped someone that night. So why was there a black SUV watching his house? He went to bed uneasy, barely sleeping. The next day things got stranger. As he stepped outside in the morning, he saw something tucked under his windshield wiper. A small folded note. It was wet from the dew, but the writing was still clear. It said, "Thank you for helping her," that was it. No name, no signature. Ethan's hands trembled as he held the note. It couldn't be from Clara. She didn't know where he lived. He looked around, scanning the quiet street, but no one was there. He felt like he was being watched. That entire day, Ethan's thoughts raced. What if Clara hadn't gone home that night? What if something had happened to her after she turned into the woods? The questions haunted him. By evening, he decided to find out the truth. He grabbed his flashlight and went back to that same dirt road. The sun had set and darkness was swallowing the forest, but he didn't care. He had to know. As he drove deeper down the narrow path, branches brushed against his car and the road turned muddy. After a few minutes, his headlights revealed something up ahead. A car. A silver sedan. His heart pounded. It was the same one. The same car he had helped fix. But now it was abandoned, covered in mud and leaves as if it had been there for days. The windows were fogged, and one of the doors was slightly open. Ethan stepped out, his flashlight shaking in his hand. "Clara?" he called softly. No answer. He looked inside the car. The keys were still in the ignition. The driver's seat was empty, but on the passenger seat lay a small black umbrella, the same one she held that night. He felt his heart race faster. Something wasn't right. Suddenly he heard a sound behind him, a crack of a branch. He turned quickly, shining his flashlight into the dark woods, but saw nothing. "Clara?" he called again. Silence. Then, just as he turned back toward his car, a faint voice whispered from somewhere in the trees, soft and trembling. "You shouldn't have come back." Ethan froze in terror. His flashlight flickered once, then went out, leaving him standing in total darkness as the cold wind whispered through the trees. Ethan didn't sleep at all that night. His heart still raced from what he'd heard in the woods, the voice, the whisper that told him he shouldn't have come back. He drove home fast, his hands shaking on the wheel, his eyes checking the mirrors every few seconds, as if something might follow him out of the forest. When he reached his street, everything looked quiet again. No cars, no people, just the sound of wind brushing the trees. He locked every door, pulled every curtain, and sat on the couch with the lights on. For the first time in years, he felt real fear, the kind that crawls inside your chest and doesn't leave. He tried to tell himself it was just his imagination, that maybe someone had been camping in the woods and played a cruel joke. But deep inside, he knew something wasn't right. Around 2 in the morning, when the world was silent, it happened. A single loud knock at his door. Ethan froze where he sat, his cup of coffee trembling in his hands. He waited, hoping it was just the wind, but then it came again. Knock, knock, slow, heavy, real. He stood up carefully, trying not to make a sound. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. He moved toward the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice barely steady. No reply, only silence. He looked through the peephole, no one. The street was empty, the night calm. He hesitated, then slowly turned the knob and opened the door just a little. The cold air hit his face and the smell of rain drifted in. On the doorstep lay a small brown envelope, slightly wet from the mist. Ethan looked around, scanning the shadows, but saw nothing. He crouched down and picked it up. There was no name, no address, just one word written on the front in black ink. "Thanks." Confused, he stepped back inside, locked the door, and placed the envelope on the table. His hands felt cold. Who would thank him? He tore it open, and inside was a single photograph. His stomach tightened as he looked at it. The picture showed himself, standing beside Clara's broken-down car on the highway, holding the flashlight. But the photo wasn't taken by him or her. It was taken from behind, from the dark trees near the road. That meant someone else had been there that night, watching them. Ethan's breath caught. He dropped the photo on the table and backed away. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The house suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. He turned on every light, checking the windows and doors again, but everything was locked. Who took that picture? Why send it to him? He sat down on the couch, staring at the photo. Clara looked scared even in the image, her eyes wide, her mouth half open as if she was about to speak. And behind her, just barely visible in the shadows of the trees, something or someone was there, a tall, dark shape. Ethan squinted, trying to make out what it was, but the image was blurry. Still, he could tell it was a person, standing motionless, watching. He shivered. For a long moment, he just sat there, listening to the quiet tick of the clock. Then his phone buzzed, making him jump. It was an unknown number. His hands shook as he answered. "Hello?" he said, his voice trembling. There was only silence at first, then a faint whisper. "You shouldn't have helped her." Ethan's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" he demanded, but the call ended. He stared at the phone screen, the words "unknown caller" glowing back at him. He tried calling back, but the number didn't exist. Fear pressed down on him like a heavy blanket. He couldn't think straight. Every sound in the house made him twitch. The refrigerator hum, the creak of the floor, even the ticking clock, it all felt louder, closer. He needed air. He opened a window and looked outside. The street was still empty, but something shiny caught his eye near the edge of his driveway. He stepped outside, barefoot on the cold concrete, and found a small silver charm shaped like a flower. He picked it up carefully. It looked familiar. Then he remembered. Clara had worn a small silver flower on her bracelet that night. His hands began to shake again. "Clara?" he whispered to the dark, though he knew no one would answer. He rushed back inside, locked the door, and sat against the wall, breathing fast. His mind raced with questions. Was Clara in trouble? Was she alive? And who was sending these messages? Hours passed. He must have dozed off because the next thing he knew, it was morning. Pale light filtered through the curtains. Everything seemed normal again, too normal. The photo still lay on the table, the silver charm next to it. He felt tired, heavy, as if he hadn't really slept. He decided to go to the police, but when he reached for the photo, it was gone. The table was empty. He looked around the floor under the couch, but it wasn't there. Then he noticed something on the kitchen counter, a glass of water. It wasn't his. He hadn't poured it. The water was half full, and beside it was a small folded napkin with another word written in the same black ink. "Stop." Ethan stumbled back, his breath shaking. Someone had been inside his house. He didn't hear them come in. He didn't hear them leave. Panic filled his chest, and he ran to the front door. The lock was still bolted. Every window was still closed. It made no sense. He looked outside again, and that's when he saw it. Across the street, parked quietly under a large oak tree, was the same black SUV from the night before. Its engine was off, but he could see the faint outline of someone sitting inside, watching, waiting. Ethan's heart thudded so loud it drowned every other sound. He stepped back slowly, closed the door, and leaned against it, breathing hard. He didn't know what was happening, but one thing was certain now. Whatever he had stumbled into when he stopped to help, that woman wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Ethan didn't go to work the next morning. He couldn't. His hands still shook and his mind was clouded with fear and questions. The black SUV had disappeared by sunrise, but he knew it would come back. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the napkin with the word "stop" written on it. Who had put it there? How did they get into his locked house? He couldn't explain it. The photograph was gone, the charm still rested beside him, and the silence in the room felt heavier than ever. He took a deep breath and said aloud, "I have to find out who she is." The sound of his own voice was shaky. He grabbed his car keys, the charm, and the note, then drove back to the same road where everything started. The morning sky was pale and dull, and the world looked tired after the storm. When he reached the stretch where Clara's car had broken down, he slowed down and parked on the shoulder. The forest stood quiet, the ground damp and soft. Ethan got out and started walking, his shoes sinking slightly in the mud. He found the old dirt road where she had turned that night, but now it looked different. A rusty sign stood near it, half covered by vines. It read, "Road closed, private property." Ethan frowned. That road wasn't meant for travelers. He walked closer and noticed something else, a piece of broken glass glittering on the ground. When he picked it up, he realized it was from a car's headlight, the same type of headlight her silver sedan had. He swallowed hard. She must have really gone down this path, but why? What was she running from? He followed the road deeper into the trees. The air was thick and damp, the only sound being the crunch of his steps. After a few minutes, he saw something up ahead, a small wooden cabin hidden among the trees. Smoke wasn't coming from the chimney, and the place looked abandoned. The door hung open, creaking slightly in the wind. Ethan hesitated but stepped inside. Dust floated in the sunlight coming through a cracked window. The furniture was old and covered in sheets, but on the table lay something that made his heart stop. A framed photo of the same woman, Clara, smiling beside another man. The frame was cracked, the glass broken. Ethan picked it up. The back of the photo had a note scribbled in pencil. "Find me before they do." His pulse raced. He looked around the cabin and found footprints on the dusty floor, small and fresh, leading toward the back door. He followed them outside, where the path led deeper into the woods. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Leave now." His hands trembled. He looked around, feeling watched. The trees stood still, but the silence felt alive. Then a sound echoed through the woods, a car engine starting. Ethan ducked behind a tree and peered toward the cabin. A black SUV rolled slowly down the dirt road, its windows tinted, its tires crunching over the wet ground. His heart pounded as he crouched lower, holding his breath. The SUV stopped near the cabin. Two men in dark jackets got out, scanning the area with flashlights. One of them said, "She was here." "Check inside." Ethan stayed completely still, barely daring to breathe. The men went into the cabin, their footsteps echoing. He waited until they were inside, then quietly moved backward through the trees, keeping low. When he was far enough, he turned and ran, branches slapping his face as he moved. His only thought was to get out of there before they found him. When he finally reached his car, he jumped in and drove off, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. He didn't stop until he was back in town, parking near a gas station. He sat there, gasping, trying to make sense of what he'd seen. Those men weren't random strangers. They were looking for Clara, but why? And what did they want from her or him? He decided to go inside the gas station and ask the worker if he knew anything about the old road. The man behind the counter was middle-aged with tired eyes. When Ethan asked, the man frowned. "That road's been closed for months," he said. "Belongs to the old Bennett property. Ain't nobody been there for years." The name made Ethan freeze. "Bennett?" he repeated. The man nodded. "Yeah, a family used to live there. Sad story. Their daughter went missing about 2 months back. Police searched the whole area. Never found her." Ethan's mouth went dry. "Was her name Clara?" The man looked surprised. "Yeah, you knew her?" Ethan couldn't answer. He just nodded slightly and left the store, his thoughts spinning. If Clara Bennett had gone missing 2 months ago, who was the woman he helped that night? She couldn't be alive, or could she? Back in his car, he searched online for Clara Bennett missing. The first article he found showed her photo, the same face he remembered from that rainy night. The story said she disappeared after her car broke down on the highway. The police believed she might have been kidnapped. Ethan's hands shook as he scrolled down. There was another line that made his heart stop cold. Her vehicle was later found abandoned deep in the woods near her family's old cabin. That was exactly where Ethan had just been. Panic filled his chest. He turned off his phone and sat there in silence. Nothing made sense. If she had been missing for months, then who did he talk to? Who sent the photo and the notes? His phone buzzed again and he hesitated before picking it up. Another message appeared from the same unknown number. "You're next if you don't stop." Ethan stared at the screen, his breathing uneven. His life had suddenly become a maze of questions and fear. But one thing he knew for sure, someone didn't want him to find the truth. Still, he couldn't walk away now. He looked at the silver charm again and whispered, "I'm not stopping." As the sun set behind the trees, he started his car, unaware that the black SUV had just pulled onto the same road behind him. Following quietly, its headlights off, Ethan drove home fast, his eyes darting to the mirrors every few seconds. The dark shape of the SUV stayed far behind him, its lights off, moving quietly through the fading light. He could barely breathe. Every turn he made, every road he took, it followed. When he finally reached his street, he didn't drive straight to his house. Instead, he turned into a nearby alley, parked behind an old building, and waited. Minutes passed. The street was silent except for the soft sound of rain beginning to fall again. He peered through the window, scanning every shadow. Nothing. The SUV didn't appear. Maybe it had turned away. Maybe it wasn't following him after all. He wanted to believe that, but something deep inside told him it wasn't over. After waiting a few more minutes, he drove back home slowly, headlights off until he reached his driveway. Everything looked normal, peaceful even. He parked the car, got out, and stood there listening to the rain tapping on the roof. He felt like someone was watching him, but the street was empty. He finally went inside, locked the door and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. He needed to think clearly. Too many strange things had happened, too many questions without answers. He walked to his table where the silver charm lay. He picked it up and turned it over in his hand. It felt cold. It reminded him of Clara, of her soft voice, of her frightened eyes that night on the highway. He whispered her name quietly, like a prayer. "Clara, what happened to you?" The house creaked softly, and for a moment he thought he heard footsteps upstairs. He froze, holding his breath, then shook his head. It's just the house, he told himself, but the uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. He decided to make some coffee, anything to calm his nerves. As he poured the water into the kettle, he looked out the kitchen window and dropped the kettle instantly. Parked across the street in the same spot as before was the black SUV. Its engine was off, but the headlights flickered once, like eyes opening in the dark. Ethan's heart began to pound. He moved closer to the window, trying to see who was inside, but the glass was too dark. He grabbed his phone and took a photo, but the flash reflected back. When he looked again, the SUV's driver's side door was open. Someone was standing outside facing his house. The figure didn't move, just stood there in the rain, still as a statue. Ethan stepped back slowly, feeling the panic rising in his chest. He went to the front door, checking the locks again. The sound of rain grew louder, the thunder rolling in the distance. He wanted to call the police, but what would he even say? "There's a car watching me." They would think he was crazy. Still, he picked up his phone and started dialing. Before he could press the call button, there was a sound, a soft tap at the back window. He froze. Another tap, slightly louder this time. He turned, heart racing, and walked slowly toward the sound. The kitchen light flickered once, then went out, leaving only the glow from the living room lamp. Ethan's hand trembled as he reached for the curtain and pulled it open. Nothing. Just the rain streaming down the glass. He exhaled shakily and turned back toward the living room and stopped dead in his tracks. The photo from the envelope, the one that had vanished, was now lying on his couch, wet, torn at the edges. And written across it in black ink were 4 words, "Don't trust the police." His throat tightened. Someone had been inside again. He ran to the front door and looked outside, but the SUV was gone. The street was empty. Only the sound of wind and distant thunder filled the air. He locked the door and backed away, feeling his whole body shake. He picked up the photo, his mind racing. Why warn him not to call the police? Were they involved? Or was this some kind of game? He didn't know what to believe anymore. All he knew was that whoever was doing this knew everything about him, where he lived, what he did, and maybe even what he was thinking. The night dragged on slowly. He couldn't sleep. Every little sound made him jump. Around 3 a.m., he looked out the window again. The SUV was back. Parked closer this time, almost right in front of his house. Its headlights flashed once more. Ethan grabbed his flashlight and a baseball bat, then walked toward the door. He couldn't keep hiding. He opened the door slowly and stepped outside into the cold rain. The SUV's engine started immediately. Its lights blinded him for a second, then it began rolling forward. "Hey!" he shouted. The SUV stopped halfway down the street. He walked closer, gripping the bat tightly. The driver's window rolled down halfway, and Ethan's breath caught when he saw what was inside. It was the same photo again, taped to the inside of the glass. His own face stared back at him from it, circled in red marker. Then the SUV sped off into the night, tires screeching against the wet road. Ethan stood there in the rain, soaked and shaking. Whatever this was, it wasn't random. Someone had chosen him. Someone wanted him scared. But why? He walked back into the house and closed the door, water dripping from his clothes. He looked around the living room, his mind spinning. That was when he noticed something new on his front table, a phone he had never seen before. It was small, black, and turned off. The sticky note on top of it read, "When it rings, answer." Ethan stared at it in silence, the rain pounding harder against the windows. He didn't know whether to throw it away or keep it. His gut told him not to touch it, but his curiosity whispered otherwise. He sat down watching it, his reflection shaking in the dark screen. The seconds felt like hours. Then, just as he started to close his eyes, the phone lit up and began to ring. Ethan stared at the ringing phone, his breath shallow, his hands cold. The sound was sharp in the silent room, echoing like a warning. He didn't move for a moment, just listened. Then slowly he reached out and picked it up. The screen had no number, no name, just the word unknown. He pressed the green button and held it to his ear. At first he heard only rain. Then a voice whispered, soft but trembling, "Ethan, it's me, Clara." His heart nearly stopped. He couldn't speak. "Clara," he finally said, his voice cracking. "You're alive?" There was silence, then her voice came again, quiet but full of fear. "Listen to me. You need to leave your house. Right now. They know who you are." Ethan stood up, his pulse racing. Who's after me?" "What's going on?" But Clara's voice faded, replaced by a strange static sound like heavy breathing through a machine. Then a man's voice came on, low and calm. "You shouldn't have answered." The line went dead. Ethan dropped the phone. It hit the floor and split open. The screen flickered once before going dark. He stumbled back, gripping the wall. His mind spun with confusion and fear. Clara was alive, or at least someone was pretending to be her. He needed proof. He rushed to his laptop and searched her name again. The same news article appeared. Clara Bennett, missing woman, found deceased. But there was a small update he hadn't seen before. It said her body had been discovered 2 towns away, burned beyond recognition, and that the identification was still pending. Ethan felt dizzy. If they weren't sure it was her, maybe she really was alive. But who was the man on the phone? And what did he mean by they? He opened his front door to get some air and froze. A small black drone hovered in front of his house, its red light blinking slowly. It tilted slightly as if watching him, then zipped up into the dark sky. Ethan ran outside, scanning the clouds, but it was gone. The only thing left was silence. He turned to go back inside and found a white envelope taped to his door. His name was written on it. He tore it open. Inside was a photo of him sleeping in his bed. The timestamp on the corner said 2:43 a.m. That was last night. He dropped the photo, his stomach twisting. Someone had been inside his home while he slept. Someone close enough to take pictures. His phone buzzed again. A text message from an unknown number. It read, "Don't trust anyone. Not even the police." The same warning as before. Ethan grabbed his car keys. He couldn't stay. He rushed to his car and started the engine, driving fast into the night. The roads were empty, the rain slashing against the windshield. He didn't know where he was going, just away. After nearly an hour, he pulled over near a gas station and parked behind it. He needed to think. He checked his phone again, but there was no signal. Then he noticed something strange in the passenger seat. A small flash drive sitting there, even though he had never seen it before. A note was taped to it. "Plug this in if you want the truth." Ethan hesitated, his hands shaking. He plugged it into his car's laptop port. The screen went black, then a video started playing. It showed security footage, grainy, black and white. The first clip showed him helping Clara on the highway, exactly as it happened. But in the next clip, something else appeared. Another car parked behind the trees, 2 men inside filming them. The camera zoomed in on Ethan's face, and one of the men said, "He's perfect. He doesn't know a thing." Ethan's heart pounded as the next scene played. It showed Clara getting into the car with the 2 men after Ethan drove away. Then the video glitched and ended. Ethan sat there frozen, his breathing shallow. They had used him. But for what? His phone buzzed again. A new message appeared. "Now you understand. Finish what she started." He frowned. "What did she start?" He whispered. He scrolled down and another message appeared instantly. "Look under the seat." Ethan reached down and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. It was a map, hand-drawn with a red X marked deep inside the woods near the old highway. Under the X there were 3 words. "The truth waits." He hesitated only for a second before starting the car again. He drove back through the rain. his headlights cutting through the mist. Every sound made him jump, every shadow felt alive. When he reached the entrance to the forest road, he stopped. The gate was still locked, just like before, but someone had cut the chain. He drove in slowly, the trees closing in around him. After a few minutes, he saw something ahead, an old wooden cabin with one light glowing in the window. He parked and stepped out, clutching his flashlight. The air was cold and wet, filled with the smell of pine and mud. He walked up to the door and knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder. Finally, the door creaked open on its own. He stepped inside. The cabin was empty except for a table in the center. On it sat a pile of papers, photographs, and a small recorder. He pressed play. Clara's voice filled the room. "If you're hearing this, Ethan, it means they found me. The people who took me are not what you think. They watch everyone, test everyone, and I was just one of many. You were never supposed to be part of this, but you helped me, and now they want you too." Her voice broke slightly. "Don't let them erase me, Ethan. Find the drive. Expose the truth." The tape ended with a click. Ethan stood there in shock, staring at the papers. Every photo, every note was about him. His job, his friends, his house. They had been watching him for months before the night he met Clara. It wasn't random. It was planned. His phone buzzed again. The screen lit up with one final message. "You have 24 hours." Ethan stood in the middle of the cabin, surrounded by files and photos that told a story he didn't understand. The words, "You have 24 hours," glowed on his phone screen, the message repeating in his mind like a warning bell. He looked down at the table again. There was another flash drive lying beside the recorder, marked with red tape. He picked it up carefully, feeling the weight of it in his hand. Something about it felt final, like the last piece of a puzzle. He plugged it into his laptop and waited. The screen flickered, showing another grainy video. This time it wasn't security footage. It was Clara, sitting in the same cabin, her face pale but calm. "Ethan," she said softly, looking straight into the camera, "if you've come this far, you already know too much. I didn't die the way they said I did. I escaped, but not for long. They're watching everything. Phones, cameras, even cars. They don't want people to know what they've been doing here." Her eyes shifted nervously to the door behind her. "You helped me that night, and they saw it. You became part of their experiment." Ethan's heart pounded as he listened. "Experiment?" he whispered to himself. Clara continued, her voice shaking. "They test people's kindness, Ethan. They fake emergencies, fake victims. If you stop to help, you become a subject. They track your reactions, your emotions, your fear. They want to know how far they can push a good person before he breaks." Ethan's hands trembled. "This can't be real," he said under his breath. But Clara's next words froze him. "They call it Project Black Rain," she said. "And once they pick you, they never stop." The video ended suddenly, replaced by a file directory labeled Subjects. Ethan clicked it open. There were dozens of names, each one with a short note beside it. Kind, helpful, empathetic, deceased. At the bottom of the list was his name, Ethan Cole, active. His stomach twisted. He scrolled further and saw a video file labeled Final Phase. He opened it. The footage showed his own house, filmed from outside, and the date was tonight. The timestamp read 11:54 p.m. He checked his watch. It was 11:48. His breath caught. They were watching him right now. He grabbed the flash drive, stuffed it in his pocket, and ran outside to his car. The forest was completely silent. He started the engine and sped down the dirt road, the headlights bouncing over the muddy ground. Behind him, faint at first but growing louder, came the roar of an engine. He looked in the mirror. The black SUV was back, its lights off, racing toward him. He pushed the gas pedal to the floor, tires spinning as mud flew behind him. The SUV closed in fast. Suddenly it rammed his car from behind, sending him swerving toward a tree. He fought the wheel, heart pounding, and barely managed to stay on the road. Then out of nowhere, Clara appeared on the road ahead. She stood in the middle of the path, waving her hands, her face pale in the headlights. "Stop!" she screamed. Ethan slammed the brakes, the car skidding to a halt just a few feet away. He jumped out, rain pouring down. "Clara!" he shouted. She ran to him, trembling. "You shouldn't have come back," she cried. "They're here. You have to destroy it." Ethan grabbed her shoulders. "Destroy what?" She pointed to his pocket. "The drive. It's not just data, Ethan, it's the trigger. Once they know you have it, they'll come for you until you're gone. Behind them, the SUV stopped. Two figures stepped out, both dressed in black. They walked slowly toward the headlights, faces hidden under hoods. Clara pulled Ethan's hand. "Run!" she shouted. They sprinted into the woods, branches slapping against their faces, mud soaking their shoes. The forest seemed endless, but they didn't stop until the sound of the SUV faded behind them. They finally collapsed near an old stone bridge, gasping for air. Ethan looked at her, confused and scared. "Why me? Why any of this?" he asked. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Because you cared," she whispered. "That's what they look for, people who still care.